this on? Listening to what John said about co-production has got me thinking about the experience that probably many of us have right now, which is supporting an elderly parent. Can I just see people put up their hands if they've got an elderly parent who needs their help at times? Okay, we're a bit of a club, and a growing club. I see my job is to oil the cogs of the wheels around my mum. She'll be 89 in April. She has a number of chronic conditions, of which diabetes has particularly set a baseline of difficulty, and 30 years later that's starting to create a number of complications. She is deaf, and you've got to speak slowly and look at her, and I've found her nodding and agreeing to a lot of things she doesn't really mean to, because people are looking for a response. So I'm there to maintain her health and well-being. That's what I see my goal is. This works fairly well when we can do things slowly and I can dialogue with her and we can go to the GP and so on. Where it becomes a bit unstuck is when there's something bigger than us to deal with. So 3 days after Christmas, my mum's with me and she has an event which I recognise as probably a small stroke. We ring through to the GP and get her to a hospital immediately. It seemed simplest to bundle her in the car. She was still a bit confused. She had lost the ability to talk for about 20 minutes. I sat in the back with her and we made the trip to hospital. We needed to get there quickly. We had trouble finding the doors of the emergency department, and I understand this is a sensitive issue, Minister Hill, but I'm not going to be talking about ambulances. So we got there, we finally found the doors, we got a wheelchair, we got her in, we got her details, we got our folder, like we were processed. And then we sat down and we had a very, very long wait for about 2.5 hours. She hadn't had her tea, she was getting hungry, we could get some water. It was quite grueling when you're 88.5 to sit and wait, but we understand that there were other people with greater needs. We finally get in there and eventually there are the processes of assessment. After about another 3 or 4 hours, my mother was feeling unwell from not eating. And I said to a nurse who was rushing by, look, excuse me, is it possible to have some food for my mother? At which she said, this isn't a hotel. She then disappeared and I never saw her again or any food. And I eventually phoned a family member and said, look, you are coming in, can you bring a flask of tea, please, and some crackers? We need something for her. Ultimately, she was to be admitted to a ward, and by this time it was 2 in the morning, and I was pretty tired, and she was okay, so I left her, and I was back there at 8 in the morning at the ward to see what was happening. There was some very efficient testing and scanning and a change in medication, and she was home within a day and a half. The problem that I saw, if we take the issue of being done to as opposed to with, is that during this conversation, I had spoken to the nurse at the ward about an ACAT assessment because emergency had said, look, while she's here, see if you can get an assessment for services. It was on track, but here's the way to expedite it. I happened to raise it with the nurse, and the next minute I have the doctor from the ward ringing me. This is between hearing she's coming home and getting there. Is there a problem about your mother going home? And I think, the doctor, I can find out, he can tell me a bit about her and so on. The entire conversation was devoted to whether she could go that day, and did I see there was a problem. And by the time we'd finished, I thought, I still don't actually know precisely her diagnosis, how we deal with it, and what happens next. And we went home. And 7 weeks later, there's another TIA, so this is getting pretty serious. And we all do this big sigh, because we know our only way back into the system is through this processing plant of gatekeeping called emergency. Whereas what I would have liked is some sort of shortcut. And I actually rang the GP. And I said, I want to speak to him. I said, is it worth going back? Can they do anything else? He said, it is best practice to go straight to a hospital in this situation. I thought, well, okay. So we went, and we spent another 8 hours. Again, she was thirsty, dehydrated, they couldn't get blood out of her, and she was hungry. So I guess that, all in all, the issue that I might say about this is that we weren't partners with that system about what was happening around her admission, and certainly when we were leaving to come home, how we could be best prepared to manage this. So to ask you what I thought I'd like, and that would be some more involvement about being ready to go home and about how we best cope and to prepare for what probably will be another event in the future.
Thanks very much. One of the things that Sue and her colleagues on the Older People's Clinical Network bring to me and to the health department and to the clinicians is a powerful sense of experience. And I think you've got a really very, very good process here of involving consumer reps. You found some very good people. It's one of the best representations I've found in a health system I've ever worked in. So the question is how we build that experience into a situation where we actually tackle the underlying cause of the difficulty and get what everybody talks to me about. The same phrase comes from everybody in the system: a seamless service, which is, that's the beginning point of transformation, is having that common vision, and that is definitely there. So there's time for a couple of questions, I think. So there's 2 roving mics, and there's a question at the front.
Thanks, John. Chris Eccles from DPC. Department of Premier and Cabinet, sorry. And there you go, there's a measure of the inadequacy of the public service already. I'm just interested in the issue of trust, and the relationship of the trust as a precondition to the co-production exercise. Because you talk about the conversation being sufficient, and I wonder whether there's a threshold question about whether there is sufficient trust in government to enable co-production when there is a suspicion about, is government doing it because of cost shifting, or are they doing it simply as a means of token expression of regard for a stakeholder view? You have to get to a position of trust before you can even start the conversations you're talking about.
I think that's a really good question. I think trust is a necessary precondition for end-to-end service transformation and the relationship to change. But, trust has to be earned and re-earned. And in the sense, the very process of saying, we want to ask these questions, have these conversations, it starts something, and people can be very cynical about this kind of thing because they've seen initiatives come and go. There's got to be a kind of sticking to it. And so part of what I'm trying to find are approaches which are rooted in a real problem, which applies that real problem, but can be scaled up and can be transferred. And I think this is a classic example of where the proof is in the doing of it, and that people who've had bad experiences, well, take parents. This is true of my experience when I was a chair of education and a school governor. It's true, I think, of people I've been talking to here. There are some parents for whom the memory of their education is such a site of conflict or pain or shame or such a conflicted site that for them, having a meeting with a principal in a principal's office is too far. What do good principals do? Good principals stand in the playground. There's a very, very low threshold of access. They'll meet you in a coffee shop outside the school grounds. Now, at the moment that happens because exceptional principals do it. Parents don't have an expectation of it, so schools that don't do it aren't failing to do it. So I think it's a sort of building up of rights and responsibilities, because there are plenty of responsibilities on parents, for example. There's plenty of responsibilities on patients, on their relatives, on their families. It's what are the rights and how do we, over time, rebuild this? Because relationships are established over time, trust is established over time, but complicated things do start with simple things. And I think that's, for me, the point, which is if you can start to find a consistent tone of voice, a way we talk about these things with each other. Because, let's be absolutely clear, too many people in South Australia blame the government for things that are nothing to do with the government. Why do they do that? Because the government's there. The State Strategic Plan is a great document. It's a really great document because it is a plan for South Australia, not for the South Australian government. You wouldn't know that from some of the press coverage you see or some of the discussions about it, that the government have failed to achieve a target that actually is owned by business, or is owned by us in terms of recycling, or is owned by local... there's something, the chief rabbi in Britain says that a lot of modern media seems designed to keep adults in a state of furious and impotent adolescent rage. And the thing is that we allow ourselves to be that furious person. And we've got to get a bit of control over ourselves too, because we are grown-ups. Because the bulk of the economy in South Australia is delivered by businesses large and small. The state doesn't control South Australia, the state enables South Australia. The state is, in a sense, state government is very like a principal in a school. You know, a bad principal can destroy a good school. You know, a weak government, a bad government can hold the state back. And a really strong government, willing to listen, willing to take ideas from outside, can actually create a space which enables the people of the state to set themselves free. Bill Clinton always used to say, the people of America have worked really hard to achieve this. He never ever said he'd created jobs. He said the people of America have done this. And of course, by being humble like that, people gave him the credit. He knew what he was doing, but he also did do it for a reason, to make a point. And so I think there is, you know, what they say about a conversation isn't just waiting for your turn to speak. A conversation is between two people. And so both parties have to want to start this and continue this. But I think one of the things is, I've found so far a huge appetite for it. Let's see if we can make it stick. Another question.
My name is Farron Foster. I'm not anyone in particular, apart from interested.
You're a citizen.
I was just wondering, when you're talking about education,
yeah.
why you've chosen to build a partnership with parents rather than going directly through students. Some people's parents might not be capable or interested in building that partnership.
Look, that's a really good question, and there's truth in it. It's a pointed question. I think the answer is that there is it's a tripartite arrangement. You know, the kids have got to want to work as well as have parents that will support them. And I recognise what you're saying, that there are some family settings which, for a range of reasons, aren't able to be the full partners or to give the kids, the students, the support that they need. I think that out of the work that I'm doing, there will be discussions with pupils as consumers and pupils as, you know, and I think that obviously the basis changes as kids get older, move from primary school into secondary schools, high schools, and I suppose that what I'm trying to look at is the linkage outward to the community. So there is an issue about how schools deal with kids inside the schools, because they're the consumer inside on the premises. This is about trying to find a way to broaden the group of people. So ideally, schools will be giving the right support and giving the kids the support. I mean, there's things that we've been talking about. People have been talking to us about this. You know, the possibility of having an online website that allows a parent to look at what homework's been set, what deadlines, what programs, what resources might sit around it, what websites you might go onto. And into that system, you could have a wiki which allows the students to collaborate with each other. So it's something that's for them to enhance collaboration. One of the things that Kenneth Robinson says in his lectures, he says, you know, there's a danger about schools and testing, which is testing says, here's the book, textbook, here's the questions, the answers at the back. Don't look at the back, that's cheating. Don't copy from other people, that's cheating. Even though when you're an adult, it's not called copying, it's called collaboration and teamwork, and it's what you're meant to do. So I think there's some ways in which you can use the technologies to enable the pupils to work horizontally. That certainly works in my son's school, where the Year 12 kids in maths work with the Year 11 kids, because they've gone through the maths before. There's some stuff online, there's some is the kids acting as informal tutors, but it's like a formal process. So I think it's a very good point, and I will make sure that during the process I not only speak to pupils, I keep that perspective in mind too.
Gary Golden from the People's Environment Protection Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of issues out there in the environment we bring up to government and get told to go nowhere in essence. So my question to you really is, when you look to measures And what measures might they be out there to relate the success of our public administration? And what ways would you raise with them to relate the accountability that they have to us as a community?
Well, look, okay. Just to go into the specifics of the accountability issue, not the specifics of the questions you just raised. This in a way takes you back to the question about how do you consume information. There's a very good, there's a very good US state educational website which allows you to look at indicators about schools, which sums up complicated information. There's tables, you can look at the tables, but it kind of, sitting on top is arrows going up and going down, and you know, traffic lights, and there are very simple ways of visualizing improvement in information. I think the important thing about information in terms of accountability, because that's part, there's two sides to this, and I'll come back to the second side in a minute, is that you want to enable people who want to get some information to get information. If they're more interested, you want them to go down to a deeper level and get deeper information. And I think there's some really interesting things going on here, across the state and in other countries, where government is making data more open so that people can innovate with that data. They can mash it up, they can turn it into different things. And I think the one thing that governments are realizing is that kids with a computer can come up with far more applications for government data than government bureaucrats can, sitting down with a blank sheet of paper thinking, you know, that's an area where innovation is moving so fast, you may as well free your data, see what people do with it. So there should be some more of that. But then I think finally, and coming back to your starting point as as an activist, I think it's important to go from information to interest to involvement. I think there should always be a route through what government does to say, if you want to get more involved in this, this is how you could do this. And it could be by volunteering in a school, it could be by being linked out to community groups. But in terms of accountability, a really important point, in my view, of accountability is not numbers, it's being able to give an account of yourself. You say what you did and why you did it, and how you did it, and whether it succeeded or not. And I think, if you think of your own lives, we think of our own lives, we make meaning of our lives by telling each other stories. Sometimes you dismiss it as gossip. Sometimes it's an email to a friend, or it's a letter at Christmas, or it's... We make sense of ourselves, our place in the world, and our friends and our relatives by telling each other stories. That is as true of institutions as it is of people. And sometimes, in all kinds of organizations, you get too busy to stop and sell. And actually you do have to stop and sell. It's part of the process. It's saying, we started here and we've got to here and now we're going to go to there. And that story is really important and really powerful, because actually quite a lot of us forget the recent past. You forget what it was like before the tram was extended, or you forget what it was like when kids, the choice of a kid in Adelaide was which other city in Australia to move to, not whether to stay here. You forget things because it's great. It's a good thing, because actually we like living in the present. So part of what we should do for our communities, for each other, and what government should do more is tell the story from beginning to end. And an honest and well-told story helps us all, because we can see our place in it. And that is quite a powerful thing, to know that there is a purpose, that the state has a purpose, that we can contribute to it each in our own way. And it may be through environmental activism, it may be through being a parent, it may be through being a cyclist, it may be, there's a whole range of ways in which we all contribute. And the great thing about powerful stories is that they allow you to see where your small part is part of a bigger picture. Because I think it is the commitment that people have to make a difference is real. People make a difference every day in their own communities. But I think it's more powerful if they know that that's part of a broader span. There are other people like them, and that the cumulative impact of all the little things we do is actually something quite big. It could be in the climate change area, where I think you've got a visionary leadership, and then you've got instruments, whether of taxation or of policy, and bringing particular industries here, And then you've got all the things that we do, some of the things that people, a lot of people in Britain put solar panels on their houses. They will never get the money back. Genuinely, you never get the money back in Britain for the installation of solar. But why are they doing it? They're doing it because it says the kind of person they are. I'm the kind of person who thinks we should wean ourselves off fossil fuels. And that's a big importance, because they're visible. It's a signal to other people. It shows there's a person like me with my values over there. And as that concatenates through a neighbourhood, we actually do the thing we're best at, which is we make a better world together. And that's really, if we go back to my point about an ageing society is not a burden on us, we chose 100 years ago, our communities chose to make health a right that wasn't something, it was fitful, it went over stages, but we decided to make health something that shouldn't be priced, and that some people get it and some people don't get it. We did all these things that we've done, from smoking bans through to the massive expansion of the health system. It's done because of who we are. It has values in it, and sometimes we don't even tell ourselves what the values are in the things we take for granted. I think we should probably do that sometimes. Telling each other stories is a really important part of civil society. I was going to say politics, but it's not politics. It's about who we are and who we are together. And on that, I'm going to hand over to Gabe.
Thank you, John. Well, everybody, thank you very much for coming. I think you could see that we're in for a highly interesting, challenging, stimulating, subtle, complex residency here about matters that we all care about. So last thing before you go, I'd just like to let you know that we have some of Judge Peggy Hora's reports available for you to pick up on the way out if you'd like to, and to encourage you to consider coming to Mr. Fred Hanson's final lecture on March the 29th. March the 29th in the Adelaide Town Hall. Once again, thank you for coming out at this time of year. It's lovely to see you all here. Thanks very much, everyone.